Hello, how's it going? My name is, you don't have to answer that. My name is Rowan Campbell Millar, um, and yeah, let me see. I think I will talk about first some politics because it's immediately consequential. Um, so, you guys have probably heard of the Democrats and Republicans. Um, they're just, they're one party basically. I mean, it's hard to know. I think there might be some elements of those two parties that are distinct and really believe that they're kind of like stopping the other guys. But I think most people with any power or common sense in the system knows that the two power parties, you know, rely on each other, that they're screwed without each other. They're like the Republicans need the Democrats to keep the libertarians out basically, and the Democrats need the Republicans to keep the Greens and other left parties out. And we saw how they both united to keep the Greens off the ballot. Well, yeah, in some instances they did unite against the Greens. Actually, in some instances the Republicans helped the Greens, but they did both unite against Bernie uh, during the primary in many instances, and they both you know shut a bunch of polling stations and were responsible for all kinds of undemocratic, anti-democratic uh, primary irregularities. Um, so yeah, the Democrats and the Republicans are terrorists. They are mass murderers. They are terrorist organizations. They are every bit as much as Al Qaeda or ISIS or um, you know any of those what I guess are normally thought of as terrorist organizations, but which have actually much lower body counts and are much less dangerous than the U.S. government, um, and or the Democratic and Republican parties. I mean, the Democratic and Republican parties are the U.S. government. They've both been in power. One or the other has been in power. Basically since Lincoln or and most of the time, I guess, since Jackson. Uh, so they basically are the government, and they, I think the parties largely exist just to protect the vested power that's already established itself in government, which has very little to do with either of those parties. It's just a normal um, scenario when you have vast wealth inequality, vast poverty, and that basically the government, regardless what party it is, unless that party is very diligently um, held to its principles by the electorate, then it's pretty natural that it will go the way of the money, as everything else does in a capitalist system or society. Um, so I guess the biggest thing I would want to say to the world, if there's anybody that will watch this, is uh, they don't like the Democrats don't care if they win. I mean, I'm sure there are some Democrats that care, and there's obviously some Democratic voters who care. But the Democratic Party, that's not its goal. Its goal is not to win elections. You know, like people think like, oh yeah, to the winner goes the spoils. But it's like when you have this two-party system where they both kind of switch off every few years and they basically split the spoils. It doesn't really matter like if you win this year or if you don't win for a couple years. Like all those, all the Democratic Congress people and senators and whatever, obviously they keep their jobs regardless who's president. They get that paycheck. But at the end of the day, that's not a paycheck that's meaningful in terms of, people think like, oh, to end corruption, just give them all minimum wage. No, that paycheck is not even like a factor for these people. No, the corruption comes from other money, not from their salary. And that money has no bearing on, like it's not contingent on whether they win. Like Goldman Sachs is going to pay the Democrats basically, basically pay them to lose. Like, everybody had the numbers uh, last year and they knew that Bernie was this you know, sure shot to win against Trump, by the polls. And they knew the same thing in 2015, And there's even footage of Bloomberg in like 2016 or 17 saying that, like, oh yeah, we all knew like Bernie would have mopped the floor with Trump, but the Democrats didn't want him. They picked the other guy, or they picked Hillary. Um, but like they knew that. So, somebody like Bloomberg, he's at the heart of the party. Like if you follow the money, right, that's where the heart of the party is. So he knew, people like him knew, they've always known like Bernie is the winning ticket. And that's why they did everything in their power to stop Bernie. They said, basically, because if Bernie couldn't win, they wouldn't have cared. There wouldn't have been all this hoopla against Bernie. But it was because they all knew. They're not as stupid as they act. They actually look at the poll numbers and they knew like if we nominate Bernie, he's gonna win. And that is much worse than Trump winning. Trump winning means it's not even really bad for them if Trump wins. Like if Trump wins, it's more fodder for their like stupid you know, mindless what passes for news like on the the cable networks. They all the Democratic Congress people and senators, they get to run on Trump. They get to say like, oh well, yeah, don't look at anything I've ever done wrong because just look at Orange Man bad. Like that's all good for them. Like there was nothing, I don't know. I feel like they're gonna miss Trump. But I think at the top of the ladder, there wasn't an election. I think Trump was meant to, like, I could be wrong in this, but at the very least, like I suspect like Trump was that Biden was supposed to win. That they basically, this was planned, either that Biden was supposed to win this time and Trump was supposed to win last time, or at the very least, it's just that they they're both basically intelligence assets. They're both basically loyal to the deep state, and therefore it doesn't matter which one wins. It's a safe bet, or it's a safe game for the elites. That's like when you have what was it, Bush versus Kerry, right? You had like one Skull and Bones member who supported the war in Iraq versus another Skull and Bones member who supported the war in Iraq. Like, and I don't say Skull and Bones to be like anti-occult or anti-secret society, but they just have a known connection to the CIA, or like that a huge amount of people from there um, were prominent in the CIA and in the security state and this type of thing. So um, I believe that, like we're supposed to think that like Biden is the pro deep state guy. And certainly all the pro deep state people are lining up behind him, or, they did during for the election. But he so he is, yeah, he loves the CIA, and I've seen him, like castigate Trump for not listening to our intelligence agencies and whatever, not trusting our intelligence agencies when they tell him what's what, tell him what to do or whatever. And so, like, obviously, like, nobody can support Biden without basically being a CIA shill. Like, I mean, to really support him as if like this is a good candidate. Like, if you pay any attention to him, you're not gonna like him if you don't like the CIA, or at least if you're not like fine with it, the CIA or whatever. So he's like getting that vote, or he got that vote. But Trump, on the other hand, he goes for the whole like, I'm he's the populist, anti-establishment, anti-deep state. Um, and like, okay, I guess maybe there's some chance that somehow, like, in some way he is, but for the most part, like what he's done, like he's very much in the swamp. He's got like these people like Mike Pompeo and Sheldon Adelson, and like just very shady, very deep state, basically CIA. Like Sheldon Adelson's basically CIA Mossad like connection. Um, so and people he's appointed, it's just been a who's who of the swamp, um, including very much deep state, warmonger, uh, uh, very bad actors like what was it, Bolton, John or Michael, anyway, Bolton, John Bolton, I guess. And so yeah, like I kind of understand how people like see Trump as the anti-deep state person, because the deep state people themselves are acting like that. They're all like calling him out. They're all, even all the Bush Republicans are all, supporting Biden. Um, but it just doesn't convince me. For the biggest reason is because of Epstein, because of having listened to the testimony of or interviews of Maria Farmer about Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, where she says, and she lived with them. Or yeah, she did basically live with them and worked for them as one of their main assistants for like a year in the 90s, like in the height of a lot of this, during Bill Clinton's administration. And she said that she's the first person who ever came forward against Epstein, you know at least to the FBI. She's the first person on record of any kind really coming forward, and he has like countless victims. So she's a very important person. And according um, to her, basically every, I think it was maybe every weekend or once a week or something like that, Ghislaine would go on drives around certain areas. I'm not sure where it was, somewhere in the US, I believe, the East Coast, and basically drive around looking for children, looking for little girls, or, like basically uh, like 12-year-old, like 12, 13-year-old girls, and like hiring them, quote unquote, for Victoria's Secret, as Victoria's Secret models, but using that as the gateway to basically traffic them and pressure them into, um, I mean, basically rape them. Like it was like, it's the kind of thing like they're pressured into accepting it, and if they don't accept it, basically get raped. And so, I mean, it's well known and accepted that Jeffrey Epstein did traffic minors and, um, you know, but basically the point of this in terms of Trump is that not only did she say that Trump was, uh, was close with Epstein, and I think she says uh, some more specific allegations against Trump of basically raping, you know, some of the children, whatever, himself, but also that Trump's Maria Farmer said that Trump's wife at the time during the Clinton administration, I believe Ivana Trump, would accompany Ghislaine Maxwell on these drives to uh, basically select children for Epstein, and or I wouldn't say for Epstein, basically for the Epstein Ghislaine Lex Wexner network, which is just, an intelligence operation, a CIA, FBI, NSA. Um, I mean, I think the things that I would tie it directly to the most would be CIA, MI6, and Israeli military intelligence unit 8200, or I forget the name, but basically very close ties to Israeli military intelligence. Um, and so basically on these drives, uh, Ivana Trump is was helping Ghislaine select these children. Um, I mean, Maria didn't have a lot of details about Ivana's involvement per se, but she just said that she was always there. She would always come along on those drives, and that she must have known what was going on. Um, and I mean, I think common sense would say that, yeah, she was probably there. She was probably, that was probably a major, uh, activity of their kind of like, of her on behalf of this network, was to help Ghislaine select these children. And Trump himself was accused of a lot of the same things as Epstein. I mean, he was accused obviously of rape, he was accused of pedophilia, but and he was also accused of having very large parties with lots of rich people and lots of very young girls. And so basically, like the Epstein network was a very important, intelligence operation. Like it was, I mean, these are people like Epstein was a key man in the Iran Contra gun running, and he worked directly for Lex Wexner, the head of Victoria's Secret at the time, who operated or was, basically used the same airlines uh, for Victoria's Secret as uh, basically the same airline that had been used for the Iran Contras. So, and I believe that they owned the same landing strip basically that was used for the Iran Contras. Um, and I mean, there's countless testimony like linking everybody in that network basically to intelligence. Um, nobody's said, I don't know if anybody's said yet that Trump himself is a intelligence asset, but to me, that's what it looks like. It's he's Trump was not like one of the people like I don't know, Bill Gates or something, who was in Epstein's book, but I mean, to be real, like pretty much everybody in Epstein's book might be or maybe everybody in there might be an asset, because that's the point of the Epstein network, was to blackmail people and to control them. You know, that's how the CIA is able to control the world. You know, they just find out, well, who has power in the world? Oh, you know, does Bill Gates have power? Does Bill Clinton have power? Who has power? Okay, well, what dirt do we have on them, or what dirt could we get on them to where we could, blackmail them? And this is something that Edward Snowden talked about a bit, which was, I think, might have been the first thing that turned him against the NSA, was that they were trying to get him to do those similar type of things in Europe, basically weird honeypot blackmail schemes to try to control bankers and powerful people. So, like there's a lot of those people in the Epstein story that were probably blackmailed. Trump, he seemed like he was so close. Like there's so many photos of them together, and but especially the detail about his wife Ivana helping Ghislaine to select the children on these drives tells me that he was closer to agent than asset. And I believe the same is true of Prince Andrew. I think the the British royals are very uh, tightly intertwined with the British intelligence community. So I think it would be probable that basically, instead of this idea that Prince Andrew was uh, just a rich pedophile, which he was, or he is, but that he was also part of this intelligence network. And, you know, I mean, he's basically de facto a part of the British government by birth. And, I think the intelligence agencies probably like to have connections to the royals because they know, I mean, compared to like having a connection to like a prime minister or some parliamentarian, because um, they're gonna be there forever. Like when the Tories are out or Labour's out or whoever's in, uh, the Royals will still be there. So MI6, that's who they want on their side. They don't want to have to answer to these like political parties or democracy or anything. So I mean, they're basically, I'm sure they largely grew out of the royalists and the royals, and now MI6 and CIA and the CIA and all these are a sort of royalty of their own, because they're totally unaccountable, they're not elected, and yet they arguably are the true government of the world. um, so yeah, I think Trump was part of this honeypot network. um, and it's strange how many people have dismissed the Epstein story as like, okay, that was some sick guy, and or him and some of his friends maybe were sickos or whatever, and just totally ignore. I mean, of course, a lot of people don't know, but I mean, the fact that it was linked to intelligence, that to like spy agencies, it's not like I'm not like the world's best researcher to find that. I mean, I'm a decent researcher, but like I didn't really do any research. It is publicly known, and I think it was even uh, more commonly said like a few years ago, and now, or maybe a year ago or so. But in general, even even those who have mentioned it tend to veer away from that issue, and they just say, oh well, all these people say Epstein's CIA, Epstein's Israeli intelligence, whatever, but we don't really know. Um, but when that many people say somebody's intelligence, it's it's meaningful, you know, like I doubt most people have been accused by dozens of people of being intelligence. Like I doubt I have, you know, you probably have not. So maybe there's a reason like why everybody says Epstein is intelligence. You know, they're not like random. And you know, the most slam dunk proof is just the Alex Acosta, I guess, whatever, whoever it is, Acosta, who was prosecuting, you know, it was the attorney general or something, and he was supposed to prosecute Epstein in 2004 or whenever that was, and basically just gave him a sweetheart deal and basically let him go. You know, like he had to be rearrested later when there was all this outrage about it. But you know, and so people were outraged. They asked Acosta, like, "What the hell, dude? This guy like raped like, you know, like countless children. Uh, what the hell?" And Acosta said, "Well, I was told uh, by my superiors or whatever that Epstein was intelligence and to drop it, you know." And he said that publicly. He said it on the record. He's never recanted that. So, you know, like there's a lot of theories like people have of like, oh, this guy could be CIA or like this guy could be CIA. But like Epstein is CIA or you know, he's if not, he was like if there's some way that he was not CIA, that just means he was like technically NSA or technically FBI or technically, you know, Israeli military intelligence. But the way these agencies operate, they're all one organization. You know, they basically all share everything. I mean, maybe not everything, but they share a huge amount, obviously. And if it's to the point where the U.S. government is gonna say, well, oh well, sure, yeah, he raped like countless children, American children, but you know, he's intelligence. Obviously, that I mean, to me at least, that implies he's American intelligence. It's you know because there are also many who say, well, he's Mossad or he's Israeli intelligence, and he's you know he's just this bad worm that got into the Big Apple, and you know like bad Zionist worm or whatever. But I don't I don't buy it because um, this is how the CIA operates. This is how all these spy agencies operate, as Snowden said. Um, honeypot blackmails and scandalous, you know, entrapment. And but the idea that the government would just say like, oh, well, no, because this guy's like Israeli intelligence, and you know, we have kind of a good working relationship with them, so we're not going to prosecute them, even though he's been like, you know, basically kidnapping and raping like American children by like the busload. You know, like no, I mean, if so, that would just mean that I guess literally that is Israel like runs the U.S. government, but there's no reason to think that's true because the U.S. is very capable and willing to do all the same stuff. And much as the US is kind of like Israel's poodle, at the same time, you know, like for the deep staters, they see Israel as the US's poodle. You know, they see Israel as our little like proxy to like you know have bases in and keep the Arabs in line and whatever. So yeah, to me, it seems clear that the Epstein network is CIA and also connected to the FBI and also connected to the NSA. But the most direct connection appears to be the CIA and Israeli military intelligence, and then MI6 through, I mean, basically through all of them. Like they're all like connected to all those because Epstein reportedly worked for MI6 during the Iran Contras. Like he was helping the Iran Contra thing on behalf of MI6, while Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert, was doing the same thing on behalf of Israeli military intelligence. But they were both kind of working together, so they were kind of both Israeli military intelligence, and they were kind of both MI6. Um, and also, and they were very closely connected to the Rothschilds, who, or like certain, like, I guess, influential branches of the Rothschild family, which were, central to the establishment of Israel, and were possibly um, Israeli military intel, or probably Israeli military intelligence connected, but also both one of the key leading Rothschilds in that branch of, or related branch of that family, along with Robert Maxwell, were both accused of and considered to be credibly accused by many of being KGB agents. So that to me brings up the question of whether the US, the NATO versus the BRICS bloc, whatever, whole like Cold War division was like the same kind of charade as this Democratic versus Republican bullshit, where literally the same people are just controlling both of them, and it's just like a little puppet show. And then they say, oh no, look, the Russians like threatened this, or the Americans said this, so we need to like take away all your freedoms and tax you more and build more weapons, and like basically have more absolute power, which is the normal wartime thing, which wars have always been used to accumulate power and maintain power. Um, but that I don't know as much about. I just found out recently about that KGB connection, that Robert Maxwell was connected to both the KGB and to its successor agencies in Russia. So that would be the NSB, or whatever the whatever Putin was part of. So yeah, so that's my spiel. I didn't know if I was going to do archaeology or politics, but I think that's an important thing. That it's, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of people who either don't care whether this is the case, like if the parties are the same or if it's all a charade, and then there are those that know it's a charade, but they find it a convenient charade, so they go along with it. But for anybody else, like, I think this is important information, and I think it's ridiculous how many seemingly cognizant, like people um, just buy into it and act like, oh no, here are these two parties that just have these, ideological differences, and they're just engaged in this honest competition to see who can win the election, and that's all they care about. And why are they just being so dumb? Like if they would only like I just, it's grating when I hear this, like when people are like, well, if you would only just run on Medicare for all, you would win. Like, why don't you guys ever look at the polls? Like, are you fucking? I don't know if I'm allowed to swear in this, but they're not, like, they know the polls. There's no poll that like we're looking at that they don't look at. Like the political operatives, they know all that stuff is popular. If they were just like, oh, all we care about is winning elections, first of all, it wouldn't even be that hard. It would just be like, oh, one party would just have to start giving candidates that weren't like complete dumpster fires, like that's all it would take to win. And then they could basically win every time. They could just, uh, but no, I mean, that's not really part of their game plan. For them, winning is like people think like that their party is like their team, and they just, that's all they care about. Like, that all the Dems care about is winning and being the Republicans. But there is something called class consciousness, and it's great that some people in the working class are supposedly gaining more class consciousness of late in the last year or however long, or the last decade. But the people at the top also have class consciousness, and it's staggering how often people seem to act like they don't. Like they're rich people, so like they don't have to be elected president as long as they maintain the power of their class. As long as they maintain the power of the elite system that they're embedded in, then they won. Like if they threw that all away just to win an election, they would, then what would they have? They would just have the actual salary of a president, or a, which is good salary, but it's nothing compared to what they make doing what they do. It would be a terrible business decision from a, strictly amoral business perspective. So like, yeah, the Democrats, the Republicans, um, certainly at the very top, they're largely one and the same party, funded by the same banks, um, and and in the Senate, it's always exemplified the most because the Senate is supposed to be like the House of Lords, and it's like the elite, uh, the you know the house of elitehood in our government, other than the White House. Um, Traditionally it was supposed to represent the wealth, and it generally is like the senators are wealthier than Congress people. So it is like the House of Lords, and the Senate is like its own party. You know, it's like if you talk to a Senate Democrat or a Senate Republican, there's going to be a lot of shared, you know, priorities that they will have, that will be distinct from either party in the House, because they just are elitist. Like that's kind of like, I mean, that is the tradition of the Senate. Basically, is elitehood. I mean, there have been great senators. There was um, I would encourage anybody to read the journal of William McClay, of the first federal Senate, in like 1780, 89 or 90 or 91 or something. Um, and he was pretty cool. He basically called them out, uh, explained how George Washington was a, right wing shill, and John Adams was like a pompous tyrant, and, you know, basically all the stuff they don't want us to know. But there's always been somebody writing the stuff down that we're not supposed to know. So if you know where to look, you can find it. Um, all right, well, that was long. It's my first video, so I'll leave it there. But yeah, Epstein was CIA, Trump almost certainly CIA, and that's why he never has gone to jail, even though he like doesn't pay any of his bills. He's like gone bankrupt a million times. Like basically does any, they call him Teflon Don, because nothing happens to him. Why might that be? Maybe because he's so close to all these intelligence people, and he is one. So yeah, I don't think like whether Trump wins or whether Biden wins matters. Like they both want to bomb Iran. They both want to. Uh, they both want to support the worst forms of Zionism, so yeah, they're both scum. Um, and anything else I should add? Well, I do not support any of these like lockdown restrictions. Um, I really think like you should either just have a